Wonderful. We can definitely run this. I gotta duck into a meeting, but if you find the beating heart of New York anywhere else, send it my way. It's good to hear from you. Peter, how you doing, son? I heard this guy dips his hot dog buns in tomato juice before eating them. Now, I get that it makes it easy for them to go down, but tomato juice? Brother, that ain't right. The Spider-Men aren't the only superheroes in New York. Getting students to class on time? One of the greatest powers I've ever seen. I was invited here once. Was busy making a deadline, but I love the idea of these rotating dinners where you really get to spend time with the chef. Good conversation, good food, amazing view. What more could you want? Marcia, one of Oscorp's super lawyers. Used to be a public defender, an amazing one. But you gotta do what you can to survive. Public transit is the lifeblood of this city. And the people down there running it all are the beating heart. New York's always had a thriving underground wrestling scene. Even been to a few shows myself. That combination of theatricality with amazing feats of strength and athleticism, it's electrifying. Oh man, Professor McKay's the reason why I'm a journalist. I snuck into one of his lectures because I was trying to impress a girl, but when I heard him speak about the role of media in a democracy, challenging assumptions, false balance, it changed my life. Just because I don't understand most modern art doesn't mean I don't appreciate it. Not to get philosophical, but art that challenges, it helps us reflect on what makes us human. I can't tell you how many times I've walked through Central Park to relax, think through work issues, just slow down my life for a bit. I owe my career to the people who work here, whether it's on the stage or in the open air. Where else can you see legends and soon-to-be legends performing every day? London? That's really far away. Can't say enough about healthcare workers. When Devil's Breath happened, before we had the vaccine, it hit hard. The medical staff in Chinatown were the first ones to figure out how to help people with lesser symptoms. Saved a lot of lives. Yeah, some things in New York you just can't explain. And that's what's great about it. Well, thanks for the photos, Peter. You've always been better at this than you give yourself credit for. Yeah, it's fantastic. But I'm a bit surprised you're stopping now since you left out two of the biggest parts of New York. The Spider-Man. Haha, the bodega beef. It was already a rivalry for the ages when it was just David versus Goliath. But when Teos had to deal with the bodega copying his success by using the exact same mascot, it stepped up to a whole nother level. My grandma always talked about going here. She'd walk across the bridge every Sunday to get the freshest vegetables in the city. But one time, she was late and the guy in front of her bought all the tomatoes. And that's how she met my grandpa. You gotta hand it to New Yorkers. I wasn't even trying to be funny there. If there's a good time to be had, they'll find it. Ah, the Manhattan Bridge. Can you believe they started building it in 1901? Finished in 1909. I thought it was old when I was a kid, but now? It's just amazing the history that's in this city. The first mural I ever remember seeing was in Brooklyn. Someone had painted the New York skyline in shadow, and I was just blown away like, you could draw on buildings and it was okay? Found out pretty quick, not always okay, but is that? Oh, man, I haven't been there in years. When we were at the Bugle's old office, we'd hide out here whenever Jonah was about to blow. I finished a lot of assignments sitting at that bar, and a lot of grasshoppers. When I became city editor at the Bugle, my first stories were all about Williamsburg, the art scene, the booming nightlife, how only 20% of the people who work there could afford to live there. We helped push the city to open up more affordable housing, and I'm still pushing at the Bulletin now. Oh, we just put out a story about this. People opening up their homes to anyone who lost theirs in the Sandman attack. Every time I start to worry about the state of the world, something like this happens to give me a bit of hope. I know it's old hat to say that New York is a melting pot of cultures, nationalities, ethnicities, and everything in between, but I do love how proud people are of their roots here. When my son was growing up, I helped coach his youth baseball team here. Every game we played, the parents talked more trash than the kids. myself included. Yesterday, one of our reporters from Astoria was arguing that a real New Yorker isn't born here. They move here from somewhere else, because that's been the story of the city for over 200 years. I can't say I agree. If you're here, you're a New Yorker. But it's an interesting theory. I've heard the original Spider-Man's from Queens. I can see that. NYC, the mecca of basketball. Sure, you can play it anywhere with just a ball and a net. But when you got the people in the apartment buildings watching, the other players trash talking, and the sound of rubber hitting asphalt, there's a reason they call it the city game. I've lived in Harlem for most of my life. Explored every part of it more times than I can count. But I don't think I'll ever get tired of seeing my home through someone else's eyes. Always makes things feel new again. When backyards are a luxury, you take advantage of all the space you can find. I don't know much about architecture, but all the big pre-war buildings on the Upper West Side do make my jaw drop whenever I'm over there. And when that old combines with this new of the murals, it makes something even more special. Reminds me of the people who write into the Bugle, and a few who work there. Freedom of speech is a beautiful thing, but saying a thing over and over again doesn't make it true. Sometimes, I worry with all the terrible things that happen in our city, people be afraid to leave their homes, live their lives. But not today. When I was growing up, I asked my dad what the difference between the Upper East Side and West Side was. Old money's on the right, new money's on the left. You know what? Still true. I mean, if I was rich, I'd take advantage of that backdrop too. I'd also be worried about constantly launching balls off the roof, but I guess they can afford it. Everyone's always surprised when I tell them Hell's Kitchen isn't so rough anymore. Of course, it's not all peace and quiet, but when gentrification is your biggest issue, I'd say things have changed. When the city fails its people, it's the people who need to help each other. I know people like to drag Midtown for being a tourist trap, but come on. The Empire State Building, Grand Central Terminal, all of Broadway? You can't deny it's a little extraordinary. Protesting isn't just a constitutional right in New York. It's your civic duty. Especially when a multinational corporation is behind a bioweapon unintentionally getting released into the city. I don't know what comes to mind for you, but when I think of Chinatown, I see family businesses, political organizing, night markets, neighbors helping neighbors. I see the power of community. Honestly, we need a whole other photo series just on New York's music. Its impact, the communities it built, its outright brilliance. It's hard to encapsulate in one photo, but this isn't bad. My best friend's kid painted this. I remember her showing me a sketch of it the day before it went up. New York is nothing without its people. I saw an old Grand Master playing there last week. Anyone could walk up and challenge him. And he lost to a kid who lives down the street from me. Dev. Never seen anything like it. Say what you will about social media, and I can say a lot. It's helped so many businesses stay afloat here when they would have gone under a long time ago. Every time I think how much money gets thrown around on Wall Street, my stomach... Oh, there it goes. Like I'm on one of those roller coasters. A few numbers on a board can completely change a person's life. It's astonishing. It scares the hell out of me sometimes. For a place where everyone's comfortable calling out when something's wrong, people here sure hate admitting when they're wrong. The writer in me does love the irony, though. Well, thanks for the photos, Miles. You're a natural at this. There. That's New York. Everything I see in these photos. All the stories and history and life. None of it would still be here if it wasn't for the Spider-Man. I hope they know that. You can call me Robbie, Miles. And yeah, it's fantastic. But I'm a bit surprised you're stopping now since you left out two of the biggest parts of New York. The Spider-Man. Ah, here we go. Now, I'll admit, I first walked into his shop because of all the articles about his new flavors, but his traditional ones are what have kept me coming back. Sometimes a classic is a classic for a reason.